it to Sant Live. I was going to call it Telescopy Live. We're now Sant Live. And, this is the last week of May. This is the last week where we're continuing to celebrate Haitian Heritage Month. And of course, the last Sunday of the month is when Haitian mothers in Haiti, celebrate Mother's Day. So we thought that it was an interesting, a very important confluence of events that we would celebrate motherhood, and we would also talk about the important roles that mothers play in transferring culture, transferring cultural traditions. And so, again, welcome, and get ready for a very interesting conversation about this intersection of motherhood and culture. We have with us a really interesting, well, we have Kenta Joseph, who is a member of Sutla staff, and we've been privileged to see her birth both of her children. So her children are Sutla babies, and sometimes we dispense advice that she doesn't ask for because we just feel that they are babies. And so she's going to talk about motherhood from the perspective of this young Haitian American mother and what steps she takes to transfer culture. And of course, we have another family member, Dr. Shirley Platin, who is also known as my daughter. So in this role, I feel like a grandmother almost to her beautiful son, who keeps reminding me that he has a grandmother. So welcome, Shirley. And we know that in addition to being the mother to your son, you've also played an important role in mothering, guiding, and nurturing a whole lot of other children in our community who have really needed that kind of soft, loving, and tough love. So it's going to be very interesting. So let's start, what is motherhood to you? And, first let's talk about what is motherhood, and then we'll talk about culture.
Good morning. Thank you for having me. It's always great to be both on Sutla Live as well as Telescopy Live. At this point, Leonie and I are co-hosts of Telescopy Live at this point because we're often on together. But for me, I think motherhood is really, we are the backbone. You are that after God, you are that giver of life, right? Generations and lineages go through your womb. So when you give birth to one child, whether it's a girl or a boy, you're actually giving birth to a generation, right? So for me, I understand the weight that carries. I also think the role of a mother, aside from just loving, and that word love is heavily loaded because I can tell you, we've had these conversations often where that's not a word that we often hear, particularly in Haitian households, right? At least that's what the young people say. So aside from being loving, which has its limits, and at times it's soft and tender, and at times it needs to be that tough love, I think there's a guidance, there's a transfer of information that comes directly from both the womb, the mind, and the heart that's often overlooked because we assume mom is just here to be a provider, mom is just here to love, and as long as I have that, that's it. But I think there's so much more to it, and I look forward to us discussing that a little bit more. And I know the transfer of information I learned from Leonie is a very important point. So I look forward to us discussing that a little bit more.
Kenta?
Yes, good morning. And Leonie, you didn't mention yourself
Oh,
in all
mother
the
too.
I'm sure you will shortly. But yes, motherhood is a beautiful and often challenging experience, and it's a learning experience every step of the way. But if I could define motherhood, I would say, it's just showing up for your children, no matter what no matter what you have, just always committing to be present and doing your best, because I promise, the minute you've got one stage down, if you figure that out, you've mastered that, they're off to a new stage, and you have to learn that whole process all over again of how to nurture them and care for them. So it's been a rewarding and an amazing experience, but again, a learning one.
Thank you. And yes, I am a mother of two adult children. And, you know, I can also say that I am the mother of, are we going to have a surprise guest appearance, Kenta?
No, they're at school.
At staff meetings, we usually have a little head that pops up on the screen.
All the time.
So, you know, I'm a mother, and I also would say that, you know, I also understand that mothering is not about always bearing the child. You know, you can, as I said, surely use mothered children where, you know, it's not that their mother didn't know. Well, yeah, sometimes their mothers don't know how to mother, or their mothers don't know how, because they haven't been mothered themselves. They don't know how to transfer that love. And so, you know, part of our role in the village is to be mothering the mothers to, and it's part of our tradition as well. We have many, you know, I have, you know, my children are always confused about who's related and who's not related. You know, wait, mom, is this a for real cousin, or
Or play?
Is this a Haitian cousin? And we tell them it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter, because the shared experience, you know, whoever did the mothering raised us in a way that we loved each other, whether there was blood, where we related by blood, or related, you know, just by circumstance. So that's definitely one thing that, you know, our women may not necessarily have the finest tools, the softest voices, but they absolutely understand that sometimes when children are in distress, the village must come through, and come through sometimes in very big ways. And so that's one thing that we recognize, because we know that there are women who have not had children, who cannot have children, and who were, in spite of all that, superb mothers. So just want to recognize those mothers as well. So culture, how do mothers transfer culture, and how do you ladies transfer culture to your children?
You want to take that, Kenta? You want me to go?
You can go first.
So for me, when I was growing up, my parents, it was important for my parents to transfer the culture, right? More than, I say this often, more than just the banana and griot and the ability to say légumes and not légumes. The ability to know more than just 18 mai, we twirl a flag, but it was important for my parents to teach me the culture, right? To understand the compa, to understand the rara, to understand those, the makeup of who we are. And the first thing that they did was to teach me the language. I can say that I learned it both at home and at church. So I learned to read it at church and sing it at church, and didn't realize then how that would benefit me later on in life. But it was imperative for me because, one, it was important for communication, not so much with my parents, but with my grandparents, right? So there was a lot that I learned, and there was a lot that was being transferred from my grandparents that if I didn't speak Creole would have been harder for them to transfer to me, right? About our history, where we came from, how my grandmother was, that woman in the community that everybody came to. And my grandfather being the person with the truck, and when he was going through the rural areas was helping to pay for school for other people's children. It would have made that very difficult to transfer that to me had I not understood or spoke English, because we wouldn't have been able to communicate. I further understand that who I am, because of my culture, a lot of times allows me to be a little bit firmer in the way that I deal with other Haitian students, right? Because I'm like, the reason is because you don't understand the wealth of your history. Mm-hmm. So I without saying I push it, but I do mandate that if our children don't know where they came from, it's hard for them to understand where they're going, right? So for me, it was important for my son, You'll see him at the Little Haiti Cultural Center. You'll see him at Haitian events. It's imperative that he speaks the Creole, and he speaks it well. He understands when he speaks to me and his dad, it's in English. And the minute he's speaking to my parents, it's an automatic answer en Creole, and he does it well.
And he knows the nuances. I can vouch for that.
And the nuances, right?
Can't get anything over him.
And the jokes, you know, and my son will say stuff like, "Nuba egari, nuba egari." You're like, where did you get that from? Right? So I think it is imperative that if we're going to pass down the culture, if we're going to pass down who we are, one of the very first things that we need to encourage is the speaking of the language, because everything else comes after that.
So Kenta, and you know, I have to note that you guys are two Miami born and raised. You're not
Yes.
born in Haiti. You know, so you know that's a really important point to make, because you are sort of raising the second generation of Haitian Americans. You being the first, and so that's very important to note that you're continuing the tradition even though you were not born in Haiti. So Kenta.
So Shirley, as you were speaking, I just realized that a lot of the transfer culture for me happened because of the village in my family. So just have my extended family members and just the church, everyone. So the village concept. And I remember when I was a little girl, my mom would speak Creole to me, but then I would always respond in English. And then she would get frustrated, or sometimes it would be simpler for her to just to speak to me in English, because it was challenging for her to communicate with me. Right. It wasn't until my godfather's wife came from Haiti, and she only spoke Creole at about age 4 that I learned how to speak Creole. And that's just one example of how just, you know, I remember when my grandparents came from Haiti, and, you know, again, I'm having to interact with them and speak to them, that became a part of the norm. But it was through these interactions with family members, and I grew up in a very Haitian church, Haitian Baptist church, so interacting with those individuals as well, that my exposure to culture just kind of happened. And I don't think it was anything intentional necessarily from my parents. It was just a part of you know, the community, just, you know, just being around the community. So that was an interesting point. With my children today, it's a lot more challenging. I have to be intentional. They're toddlers right now, 2 and 4, and their father is not Haitian. And so I'm the only link in our immediate family. So it's unless I'm conscious about it, okay, we're going to you know, on January 1st, observe Haitian Independence Day and have Soup Jumu, it's not going to happen for them. So I have to be very intentional about the things that we do and cook Creole dishes, and just in order for them to get that exposure. And I do. So, yeah.
You know, we all know that when we thank you, we all know that when we talk about children, and sometimes children who are not adapting well, you know, we always blame the mother, right? It's because mom didn't create this environment, mom was negative, mom was brutal, mom was this and that. And so in acknowledging that sometimes it is a problem, that in this transfer of culture, you know, there are negatives, right? There are things that we wish we could remove from the culture, understanding the trauma that caused it, understanding the context that caused it. We still don't want to replicate it. And so how do we, you know, I know that for me, you know, I went to therapy at times, you know, in order to be a better parent and understand that it wasn't my mother's voice, it was my grandmother's and my aunt's voice that I had to kind of extricate from my, I had to silence their voices so that, you know, I felt that I had more control over how I wanted to raise my children, still within the culture, but with different approaches, you know, different things, you know, being more positive as opposed to always being critical you know, that critical voice, you know, you're getting out the door and you hear, is this how you're gonna look out, you know, are you really ready to go out? Don't you think, is that what you're gonna wear to go to that meeting? Just make this and that was a killer for me. That was like the killer for me. And so, and many other things, you know. And so, how do you guys, you know, silence that voice? It doesn't have to be mom, it could be grandma, it could be my aunt, you know, because again, we're not mothered by one person in our community. We are mothered by the village of women who think that they have the right to mother us. And so there's godmother, there's marraine, there's my aunt, the older cousin, the village of women. And so how do you, you know, when you're raising your children, how do you try to filter, once you acknowledge that it had an impact on you, how do you try to filter that part of the culture that you don't necessarily want to replicate?
Ooh, that's a heavy one.
That is a heavy one.
Wow. You take it day by day and situation by situation. That reminds me of my son who has long hair. In our culture, boys don't have long hair. So I got a lot of just not criticism, but just a lot of, okay, you should cut his hair. You need to do this. You need to, just a lot of parenting on my parenting. So, and then he was very, very timid at first, and he wouldn't want to greet everyone. And in our culture, you greet everyone with a kiss. So, but my philosophy was, he's his own human being, he's his own person, and if he doesn't want to greet you, he doesn't have to greet you. And honestly, it was one of those things, you pick your battles, and sometimes I would be like, go say hello, go say hi to grandma, or and other times I was like, quitte l'oreille, lève-le, la vin joindre nous, lève-le, quitte l'oreille. So it was just a constant, just feeling it out, feeling the situation out and seeing when it was appropriate to challenge them or just, let it go.
I think I have to agree with Kenta on that part. I think part of the challenge that I have is my son is he's aware of who he is. He's very aware of that, right? And he's very aware, and ever since he's 7, 8 now, ever since he was young, he knew what he liked and what he didn't like. So the people that he connected to, it was an automatic connection. You didn't have to fight with. He'd walk up and hug if he knew you. And till this day, I have partners that he knows by name. He's not afraid of. And then there are just some people, for whatever reason, he just doesn't connect with. He'll stand in a corner and stand there and just say hi. And oftentimes my mom would say, and I'm like, that's the salary he gonna get, right? Or no, and I'm like, no, but I have to respect. So the concept of respecting that child is their own person, right, with their own sentiment, their own dignity, for whatever reason, is something that they don't buy into. The parents don't necessarily buy into. But I also learned the way that it worked for me is I had to call it when I had to remember the things that I was uncomfortable with when it happened to me, so that when I saw it being done, that I called it out. And an example was my grandmother on my mother's side. Whenever she would get upset, would say, she would call my mother's name, Tifiula. And I remembered how that word Tifiula made me feel, right? And my comeback, and that's when I often forgot I was Haitian, Tifi, right? And I'm like, and my mother would say, I said, but my name is not Tifi, right? So as my mother gets a little bit older, even in joking, or she'd say, Tigason, and I would say, Mommy, don't call him Tigason, address him by his name. That's your grandchild. Oh, mfashe. Yeah, but even in being angry, don't dismiss him like that. Don't disconnect as though this is someone you don't know, you don't have any affiliation with. And maybe she wasn't doing it, and maybe it was my trauma of having lived through it, and I knew how it made me feel. So what I've learned is definitely when things happen that I remember how it made me feel, whether it was directly my mom and aunt and uncle, whomever, I try to call it out immediately so that my son, that's that filtering, my son doesn't have to deal with it, and then try to connect with him. She didn't mean it this particular way, and kind of walk him through, because I don't want him to feel how I felt when it was done to me.
Do you guys chastise your children in Creole? I know that for me, I remember my kids were doing a play. They were sort of doing a skit about mom, and mom would give words of love in English. It was like, oh, I love you, boo boo, I love you, come to mommy. And then it's like, Kale, tranquille, Ashita. And then, I was like, oh my God, when I saw them act it out, I was like, this is bad, because they're associating
But so
Creole.
But it's true, all of it.
I mean, and they did all of that. And I was like, wow, there were no words of love in Creole. It was always in English.
And it's funny that you say that, because I remember growing up thinking negatively about the language Creole.
Right.
Like, it's hard, it's rough, it's a certain kind of way. But it took me later as an adult to romanticize it again and
it's about doing chores. It's about I mean, you don't say, well, why are you standing here not doing anything? It never comes out like that. It's like, short fella, I mean, it's always like that.
And I think it goes back to, for us as Haitian Americans, I don't care where you come from. When you get mad, you go back to the mother language, right? I'm loving, I'm caring, there's time for that tough love. But when I'm at that level of frustration, my first instinct, like, I forget the fact that I speak English. It's just that automatic go-to, right? And I remember when I was about 3 or 4, I was in church and they put me on a stage, on a chair, so the church can see me, to say, Voici Noël, Jésus est né, quel grand dame. When I got off the chair, and I said, but why doesn't that language sound the same at my house? And that's when the differentiation was made for me, that's French and this is Creole. And I remember at that age saying, I like that one better. It sounds nicer, right?
Wow. So there's a question. Can culture and self-esteem contradict?
Yes. Because, and I think for me, and I can only speak from the perspective of the work that I do, I think a lot of times our young people feel as though our parents don't respect the concept of self-esteem, right? Because they don't often understand that what they're saying, what may be from a good place, and I'm going to say it so that I can, how do they say, pour me toucher sentiment, so you can do the opposite, where in reality, what they're doing is tearing down a child's self-esteem. So it is very true where culture, yes, we like to be tough. We like to be very honest about our feelings, because we're hoping that the reverse psychology is what's going to kick in, and that child will understand, I got berated enough, I'm going to do better so that I don't continue to get berated. Whereas the self-esteem part of it, though, is I hear you calling me petit papam, I'm never going to be more than what I am, and right? There is, in our mind, there is no reverse psychology, because I'm taking exactly what you're saying literally, and it's tearing apart who I am and my self-esteem and how I view myself in comparison to how I deal with others, how I deal with myself, how I value myself, and then ultimately the relationship that you and I have in the household.
Absolutely. Do you want to say something about that, Kenton?
I agree, but I think it's a fine line, because are we then saying that there is no place for that, or that shouldn't exist, or is that something in our culture that that's necessary at times? I don't know.
No, I mean, sometimes when you look at issues of race, for example, in Haiti, Haiti has its own racial issues, you're dark, light, etc., etc. And you're growing up here as a Black person, knowing that you're being judged as a Black person, you're being evaluated as a Black person, and in your house, sometimes your Blackness, if you happen to be the darkest one in the family, your darkness is almost utilized against you. And so, what happens to you when you're facing the world if before you leave the house, your mom says, you're already so dark, why don't you wear a dress that's lighter? Ou déjà tout noir, pour que ça c'est couleur ça wap mette? Li pa fort bien, comme si it's going to make you look darker. And so it is part of the culture. Let's admit that not in all households, but in some households, particularly girls, have had to deal with that. And so, yes, sometimes what is considered culture does have an impact on self-esteem, whether it's weight.
Right.
As a big girl, I've had to deal with questions of weight all my life, where my parents, especially my father, would make comments about my weight. And he didn't understand how, and he never understood. It was like, but, I love you. Why would you think that I love you less because I laugh? I laugh, because you're big. I laugh because, and I understood that it was something that made him feel uneasy. It was something, my obesity made him feel as though he had failed in a way as a father not to keep me thin because he had an issue with weight. I realized later that he did not like fat people. And so to have his daughter being very heavy set, he just felt that it was okay, as you say, to shame me into losing weight. It was like, yeah, I'll mention that and eventually you will get it and you will stop eating because only if you stop eating, because maybe you eat too much. I don't see you eat a lot, but maybe you eat too much and you stop eating if I call you fat and et cetera, et cetera. So yeah, this idea that people can, and the idea of jokes, right?
Right.
The jokes about you, and why you being so upset, it's just a joke. Some of us have heard those jokes. Again, being big, you hear them all the time. I mean, I've been told once, oh, from another maternal figure, I mean, look at how much weight you've gained. You're as big as a cow. And of course, when I started crying, I was like, what's wrong with her? She doesn't take a joke well.
But I've learned in our culture, a lot of times we utilize the mechanism of a joke to send a message, right?
Yes.
And that is how, and then when you realize that you may have hurt someone because they react, but it was just a joke. So
Right.
it's a way of getting the message across and still leaving an out.
Susceptible.
Right.
Susceptible.
Right. And I think, Leonie, to the point you're making about the weight, I've had young ladies that I've worked with in the community. Let it not be that one of us has coarser hair than the other, right? And that's a real thing, which makes the whole weave concept, the concept of girls having to become, young girls a lot older and a lot quicker, because at home you would hear, and we're not realizing, whereas we're not having that same conversation with someone who may have nicer hair. These are real, and that's where a lot
boys.
of
Boys.
Yeah.
Yes, Kenta?
No, I agree. Those negative elements within our culture definitely do affect esteem. But I'm trying to, I guess what I'm grappling with my mind around is, how do you cope with that? Or how do you deal with that? Because I know there's to this day, my mother, there's some things that she does. We know that she's going to be like that forever. There's nothing you can change. So,
you just don't let your kid be around. For me, it was about not letting my kids be around certain people at all times and explaining the context of comments, because you can't just shield them from family members but you really had to explain things like good hair, bad hair. You know, my daughter was like, you know, Aunt so and so kept, you know, talking about my hair, and she was like, oh, you know, thank God she's got her dad's good hair, something, because my daughter is dark, and so thank God meant that the soft hair sort
Look
of
better, right?
balanced the color, right? And so I had to sort of say, well, you know, she doesn't know better, and I had to talk about, you know, plantocracies and I had to give them the historical context. And she goes, really? That's what she calls, you know, she calls good hair, you know. And so it was, you can't protect them all the time. And so it's best to have this open conversation to, again, place the culture in its context. So we're going to be closing, and I just want you, I don't want to close on this sort of negative discussion. So, you know, I'd like you to share something really positive that you've experienced either as mothers or as daughters of Haitian mothers, you know, that were really powerful ways in which they transferred the culture.
So I guess I'll go. For me, I think one of the ways, probably the most powerful way that my mom transferred the culture is through religion, right? My mom is heavily spiritual. And so for her, it's always been a thing that we, you know, we're connected. Just like Kent, I was brought up in the Baptist church. So a lot of, and till this day, we go at it back and forth because, as she calls it, right? Like some of these beliefs and all day long, like some of that stuff we're just not doing over here. We're just not going to do it, right? So we battle that a lot, but it also is the way that she has transferred, one, her love for her love for others, her love and ability to show grace to other people when they harm you, right? That idea of the golden rule, you want them to treat you. So a lot of the lifelong lessons that I've learned have really been rooted in her spirituality. And then I then turn around and not just have learned it, but have passed it on to my son and have tried my hardest to pass it on to the children and families that I've had an opportunity to you know, to work with and empower and inspire. So I really want to say that our culture is so much more than the dancing. It's so much more than, you know, our ability to celebrate in the community, you know, around the month of May. But our culture is actually year round, right? If you start, as Kenta say, then you go to May, and then you go to Desalina in October. And I'm just talking about some of them, right? Because there's a reason to celebrate being Haitian, a Haitian mom. And that's why I wrote the shirt, Nou La Pired, because as moms, I think regardless of the sacrifice we make, we understand, fuck nous là. There's no option, right? We can't wake up one morning and say, you know what? I don't want to be a mom today. That's just not an option we have. Just like I can't wake up and say, I'm not going to be a Black woman. So I understand that part of who I am and what I give back to community, what I give to my child, really is rooted in who I am, really is rooted in what I have been passed down from the language, the love, and the ability to love, but more importantly, the ability to be fierce in what we do, how hard we love, and how hard we fight for one another. I understand that all comes from the motherland itself, and then transcribed down to me through my mom and everything that I've
learned. Perfect.
For me, I would say that one of the most beautiful and the biggest things that I've learned from my mother is just this sense of this spirit of just nurturing and selfless nurturing and caring for everyone. When I say everyone, I mean everyone. Our home is like an open door policy. Everyone has been through my mother's house in terms of just whatever their transition was, whatever the period was, if they were new from Haiti, just her being one of the first people in our family to come to America. She received everyone, you know, the financial support, the just support on all levels. She just has selflessly given so much to not just members of our family, but just to the community, the village. And then my grandmother was like that as well. From, you know, the stories I've heard about my grandmother in Haiti, everybody's children were her children. She raised so many children that were not hers. And so it's just that lineage of that spirit and that nurturing is just amazing.
The women of the Lakou.
Yes.
Yes.
You know, and I have to say that my mother is not a very religious person. I didn't grow up with very religious parents, but what they raised, our transfer was, you know, love of Haiti, love of Haitian culture, and love of Haitian art, music. I mean, she really, um, they sort of inculcated this love in us, you know, since, you know, we were very young. And so almost to a point of reverence. And so that's how, and that's what I try to communicate to our children. Language and understanding of who we were as a people and our responsibility to not just ourselves, to our families, and to the country that even though we're not born in, still runs in our veins. So on that note, ladies, we're going to wish you a happy Haitian Mother's Day. Happy
Same to you.
Mother's Day to all women who have mothered, whether they have given birth or not. You know, we'll have a new word, the women of the Lakou, who have all put their hands one way or the other in making sure that our children sort of grow as tall and powerful trees. So thank you and see you next week.
Thank you for having me. Great conversation.
Yes.